Hello and welcome everyone. Today is February 3rd, 2026, and we're focused on a Digital World Town Hall meeting and General Council meeting that happens every week. Again, today is February 3rd, 2026. The agenda will flow like this. We'll work through general kind of updates that we may have over the last week, and then we will have open Q&A on topics that are going on. They may blur together because it's really similar. And for those that want to get involved and want to have direct involvement as the digital world continues to mature, you're welcome to it. There is no requirements. You don't have to be connected to anything. You don't have to have a bank account that's a certain size. You don't have to look a certain way, and your skin doesn't have to feel or be a certain color. We're all one world and one people, and everyone is invited, and we're grateful for the live audience that's actually with us now, and for all those from around the world. We've got people from Aotearoa, also known as New Zealand, from Australia, from Canada, from the US, and from Europe, and we're grateful for their attendance. We're going to get started with a prayer from Bryson, and we know that it's very important to recognize who we are as individuals and where we are, and this important work that we're focused on, which sometimes we've referred to the digital layer, but the bottom line is we can't do this on our own. So Bryson, if you could get us kicked off, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity to come together, as Michael said, one people that are seeking a common denominator, that we might come together and share our heart and our understanding and come to the action plan required to continue to make progress on bringing unity and love throughout the world. And Father, we ask that thou might bless us with the understanding of how we may individually participate and structure our lives in a way that facilitate this development. Father, we ask that our spirits, our hearts, and our hands may be clear and clean. Help us to continue to grow towards each other in love and light. And we say these things in thy name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, Bryson. Thank you for the person that you are and for what you stand for.
Love you too, Mike.
Grateful for those hosts and co-hosts that help us, especially that have been consistent for coming up on 30 years now. Grateful for the opportunity to work with such stellar and amazing people that care for the right reasons. They're willing to give their time and their effort and their attention. We're grateful for laws and for structure, even though some folks may say, we don't want to live by that law, but we're actually grateful for these laws and these principles and even covenants that we have the opportunity to abide by. As for a reminder, this is a private membership association, which is actually protected by some beautiful structure. We'll talk a little bit about, and some of the things we may discuss might be in the future. Every single meeting for the last almost 4+ years, every Tuesday. Today, I've actually felt like garbage, at least physically. I had a hip. It physically didn't feel good. I actually took an Advil. That's for somebody that's never. For those of you that know me, I just don't do that. But every single week we stand up and we talk about this. We talk about secret combinations that come together to basically take away choice for humanity. And this last week, it's been very, very clear, at least from my perspective, that this is truth. This is really the effort to stand up and create a parallel path and to fight against this is actually more important than ever. And one of the things that actually has been brought to the attention is, for those of you that don't know, the digital world's closest competitor, which I believe has about 20% of the technology that the digital world has today, is Ripple. And the CTO of Ripple basically resigned in Q3, effective in Q4 of 2025. And this last week, it's becoming very evident as to why. The connection between the secret combinations in technology, namely Ripple and even Bitcoin. And I don't think it's directly, some people are saying that Jeffrey Epstein is basically the guy that's Satoshi, and I don't believe that at all. I believe that there may be some money that's provided, but I know some of the folks that actually personally, as a matter of fact, just 2 days ago, what is today? No, yesterday, talked with one of the individuals that's named in the Bitcoin white paper. Wonderful individual, and he's actually overseas, but we'll meet when he comes back. But it's just been very eye-opening to see fear, uncertainty, and doubt mingled with rumors around what's happening with Jeffrey Epstein and the many files that were just released, and how it ties to Bitcoin and how it ties to Ripple and Stellar, which are three of the technologies that the digital world in one layer, just one layer. I'm going to break into, actually, I'll just open up a new tab. So digitalworld.earth. I'm going to go ahead and just click on the main homepage. And actually, you know what? You can kind of see the different layers, right? So identity and finance and storage. There's also a documents area that digs into it even more in depth. At least there should be here. So this payments layer is really what Ripple focuses on, okay? And Bitcoin as well. But there's so much more before you even get to the payments layer that you've got to go through around standards and functions, and then what we call life. And that means something. There's actually some depth to that. And then identity and storage, and then payments. But if we focus in on this identity thing and what identity really means and the importance of it and the people that are actually behind this, and we kind of dissect that, I believe that what we're talking about with the digital world can become very, very real. So the contrast is basically this. There are secret combinations in different parts of the world. Some may be in media, some may be in oil, some may be in pharmaceuticals, some may be in shipping, some may be in healthcare, some may be in different things, but they come together in different ways. And what we're seeing with Jeffrey Epstein is they're coming together because of the natural tendency and desire inside of the human. I'm not just talking man, I'm not just talking woman, but the natural desire that is placed in us to be able to reproduce, and the way that it can be perverted in such a way and twisted in such a way that then ensnares and continues to take away the choice of the individual. The net is there are private and public ecosystems, and we're starting to see some of the things that happened in the private in these documents. And we're starting to see how these secret combinations work to then take over governments. They take it over with the elected individuals or with the election systems. And the net is how the digital world can actually become a parallel alternative that no one owns and controls, including an individual like a cheerleader like me. Like, there are some amazing folks that are behind the scenes that develop 5 days a week. We try not to do 7 just so we can have balance through life. But there are some wonderful people that are dedicated to this work to truly give it away to humanity, to truly enable future generations. So when we take our last breath, like, I felt so yucky this morning. I actually talked to my second oldest son and said, there's going to be a day when your dad doesn't take another breath. And are you going to be ready for that? And we just talked about that. I mean, these bodies, they're just very real. And don't get me wrong, there's no issues. I mean, yeah, so I've got a hip that's out and struggle to sleep, but that's it. But my point that I'm driving at is we need to put this in a particular solution or way that the next generations can just continue to pick up where the developers are and where the systems are. And one thing that's been very prominent, or at least understood, is Bitcoin was never just set it and forget it. From 2009 all the way until 2015, it was actually manipulated. The way the money was put into it, the way the awareness was drawn. As a matter of fact, has anybody ever wondered where the actual Bitcoin logo came from? Or, in my opinion, there's a wonderful gentleman, his name is Joby Weeks, and he's been kidnapped for the last 6.5 years with an ankle bracelet. And I believe that he personally, along with some others, were directly involved in not only mining, but driving awareness for at least 30% of what the world knows as BTC or Bitcoin. And when you start digging into how is it funded, how does it work, and not just BTC, but XLM and XRP, all of those other assets. But when we talk about true decentralization and what's happening with centralized systems, that is the parallel alternative. So the goal is the digital world to truly be decentralized. There is no central system. There is no central cheerleader, all of those things. Some of you may think, well, we always see your face on these meetings. And yes, there needs to be intelligently organized systems around it. But that doesn't mean that it's one person. That doesn't mean that it stops when that person stops. That doesn't mean that it is centralized. And that is the real goal of the digital world, is to create a parallel system that provides choice that is based on decentralized systems. The truth, because I personally, and I know many of you on this call, you see decentralization as a true and correct principle, but it's hard to actually quantify and understand. Like, how do the cells in our bodies work? How does the universe work? Whether we're looking through a telescope or a microscope, how do we actually see the differences there? So with that being said, the digital world and these layers and finding balance, and for those that may not be aware, you just get 12 words, you link it with you physically, and you do it in a very private way. Unless you're on Apple and some of these other devices, then you're basically already linked your face into the system. But you basically do that, and then you get derived keys. And this was what makes artificial intelligence not be able to follow you in this new environment. So if you parallel and contrast what's happening within the digital world versus the Bitcoin world or the XRP world or XLM world, those environments are basically centralized. They're not private. Some of the transactions may improve from what Bitcoin is on average around 10 minutes all the way to real time or near to it, but they're not scalable and private, especially when it comes to layering AI in combination with our identity and payments. So the goal of the digital world is connect those physical systems with the digital systems together for future generations. It doesn't just start with identity. It starts with the individual using technology that can actually enable them to be recognized by governmental entities. And that's a really, really big key, because now we're actually having government that is starting to stand up and to do what is right for this technology. For those of you that are aware, we basically measure inside of this meeting some goals. One of them is around You Own You. One is around of Life Vault. One is around Utah Life. We'll also talk about that with what we call Utah Market. And then autos, and then AI. AI will be a massive thing that we'll go through this year. This is actually a message this last week that was posted by the CTO, the ex-CTO of Ripple. And he basically said, you know, I don't get involved in conspiracy theories, but this could be the tip of an iceberg that is massive. And as I personally started digging into this and understanding what it's saying, there's a very interesting reality there. I would say that Jeffrey Epstein is not the author of Bitcoin. He may be some of the original funders, but the gentleman to my left here, particularly this gentleman here, is mentioned in the Bitcoin white paper. This gentleman here is an absolute, he sat on before I started any of the Clear companies in 2009, I started a company in 2000 called Direct Point, and he actually sat on that board. His name is Phil Winley, wonderful man. And I'll drop some hints from here and there, but what you're looking at here is a bunch of leaders in Utah that are not only talking about how things can actually come together for future generations, but they've already created 6 laws and they're working on 3 more. I believe 2 of them will pass in the next 30 to 45 days. And then hopefully in April, we can actually start unpacking what that actually means for humanity. These are some of the individuals that are behind the state. So you've got Chris Bramwell, who's the Chief Privacy Officer. You've got the CTO, this is Alan. You've got some technologist folks, wonderful, like just really, these individuals truly care. This is actually at the first SETI conference here in Utah. This was in October. We'll have another one that will happen in April. And these individuals are behind not just the layers that we were talking about, but they're behind the policy and how government recognizes the layers as an individual can own their own decentralized identity. These two individuals here are senators that get blockchain. They get the ability to actually understand. This gentleman here, Kurt Killamore, and I love this guy's dad. I know him really well, and his brother too, but I've met him a couple times. But the point is these guys are fighting right now, and gals are fighting for legislative laws to be pushed through. And when we can push them through, then we can start actually enacting these systems in real world life. And I believe the parallel systems can start replacing systems and the current systems that are deployed. I'll give you some. We've got DoorDash, we've got Uber or Lyft, and we've got Amazon. Those are three examples of centralized technologies or systems that use centralized identity and payments. And it may be an experience from your world that says, hey, I can order an Uber. It tells me what the license is, and it tells me what the driver's name is, and then they know what my name is, and they know where I am. And so we connect up. But there's so much that happens behind the scenes, whether you're ordering a car or ordering a package, that actually is centrally profiling. And I promise you those data sets will actually be shared with centralized systems. And I'm not saying that we need to worry. I'm not saying that data or privacy is something that is a massive issue. What I'm saying is the way that this data in the future is going to be combined. And I've said this before, you take identity, you take payments, and you take AI, and you link them together, especially AI that learns from other AI. And over time, we will be enslaved and our choices will be taken from us. And what these systems can do is they take the data set from our identity and our payment, and it pulls it out of that system. So for instance, imagine being able to get a delivery the same day for a product that you purchase, or maybe the next day, similar to Amazon, or imagine being able to order something or to get a ride with a system that is actually tied to the individual's decentralized identity and decentralized payment and decentralized reputation. And we can actually use these systems in real world environments, replacing the centralized parallel systems. And that's one of the big things that we've actually been able to stand up within this last week. I'll see if I can actually show you what I'm talking about. So this particular system replaces those three things. We're rolling it out with sponsors that are here in Utah, with technology that's here in Utah based upon Utah laws. If you haven't seen those laws, these are what they're built on. So the Privacy Act, the Digital Choice Act, massive, massive future there. Private Membership Association and Recognition Act, the Currency and Innovation Act, that's around gold and silver. If you haven't been paying attention to gold and silver, I highly recommend you do that. And then House Bill 470 and specifically the Senate Bill 260, which are actually tied to individual identity, and eventually they'll tie to what's called SETI, State Endorsed Digital Identity. If you're not familiar with this, just go ahead and keep paying attention. This was actually the first version that was back in October. This here is actually the version that actually went in to the Senate. And so this, let me just see how, this is 31 pages. Wonderful document. If any of you want to review it, this is the latest structure. By the way, I should send this over to you, to Andy, for sure. But this is a document that I believe will actually help to change how humanity is freed or not. And then when one state recognizes it with another state and then another country or another province or another kingdom, it can literally change the way that humanity actually operates. Instead of having things like within Ethiopia where it's like, hey, if you don't download this app and tie it to your identity, then you don't get your cell phone. Or in South Asia where it's like, hey, if you don't download this app and tie it to your identity, you don't get your bank account or the assets inside your bank account. Or for so many folks over in Europe and England, that basically the prime minister said, if you don't do it, you can't work. And it goes on and on and on. And these threats and these controls, we've seen it before. We saw it with COVID. No matter what your belief system is, I don't care if you think that the actual vaccine was something that was effective. The choice around the matter was controlled. I believe it wasn't about a virus, it was about a financial reset and digital control. And I said that like in January of 2019, and people went crazy when I said that. But I think the history is actually following through. But I digress, because it's not about what we inject or don't inject. It's about our choice to be an individual. And that individual structure, kind of like what I showed you over here, this identity layer is massively important. And then you can layer, your data, your payments, your assets, your services, or even this governance model, which is what the state's working off of. But the key is the individual must have their own identity first. And that is what the digital world is focused on, is the technology behind that, so that they can actually, everyone, can be their own person. So the advancements between that with the state and with this Utah market are actually starting to stand up. So if people actually say, hey, I want to actually order a ride, or I want to order a steak, or I want to have something that's actually delivered in my part of the world, and it's not just delivered, via a van, if you will. It could be something that's just fresh the same day, or it could be something that's, you use the same delivery mechanism as actually you would a ride. And when you tie all this stuff together and you tie it to a local environment, you're actually decentralizing these services. So you can make the services so they can be local, but you can also do them in such a way where the individual owns their own identity, their own reputation, and their own payments, and it creates a new economy. It goes back to what Raghu, who's joined us so many times, amazing economist, says that, it's not a matter of what you vote, it's a matter of what you buy and how you pay for it. And I really believe that to be a massive, massive truth. So with that being said, these are some things that have actually been able to transpire this last week. A lot of truths behind it, shopping systems behind it. I believe one of the most important things is real food, is real, and something that we have a stewardship over. For me personally, I was a vegetarian for so long, and I struggle eating chicken too, just because I raised them and I love them. But the net is the ability to get whole food that actually has health based around it, around a local supply chain, and to get it delivered in an environment that's actually very effective, and in a way that is actually using these decentralized processes around identity and payments and others. So we're grateful to be able to start standing that up. There'll be a lot more maturity that will come to that in the future, but those are some of the things that we've been focused on and working through. There's a lot of other things, primarily around life, as well as around some of the things with Clear Holdings. But those are basic topics. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to the general audience. Anyone that has any kind of questions or thoughts or topics that they want to go through, now is your time, and you're welcome to it. Any thoughts or comments or feedback on what you've just observed, or maybe what you're seeing out in the world? There's nothing, no right or wrong topic that you have to discuss. Any criticism, any direction that you want to see in a different way, anything you want to go through, it's up to you.
I guess as a newbie, just stepping into what you guys are working on, I'm just curious where you're at on the technical front, and like how you actually planned on building this out technologically. I love the vision. I love the vision. I'm 100% on board. Decentralization. I'm a crypto guy. I'm excited about technologies like zero knowledge proofs and things like that. So I guess I'm just curious where you guys are at.
Yeah, so zero knowledge proofs, we also agree with and love, and what we're doing with derived keys is actually what we believe to be the future of that. What do we got going on here? Okay. So I'll jump into an interface so you can kind of see it, and I'll actually do it within the Utah environment. What I'll do is I'll kind of just log in. So I'm going to grab a phone. It works on any phone, any Android or any kind of Windows or Apple device, as well as, I don't know if you know this, but we built our own phones. They're called Clear phones. So I'm logging in, And it basically logs me into that Utah jurisdiction. My identity has this identity has 4 different wallets. You can see different assets within that wallet. And then you can basically send and receive them in real time, or you can go ahead and transfer them. Let's say you wanted to go from USD to BTC. You know, literally the ability to go ahead and do a couple of those things. I'm just going to go ahead and scan it again. And so what I'm showing you is real time, answering your question around maturity. This isn't something that's hypothetical. It fully functions. I'm going to put my finger on here, something I have, something I am, something I do in a certain space and time. That's 5-factor authentication. I literally just made a real-time transfer of one asset class to another asset class in real time. The assets are owned by me as an individual, and it doesn't just tie to, you know, a particular asset. You talked about crypto. I think that crypto is just one category of many. There's also commodities, equities, currencies, assets, your normal bank accounts, whether that's with Bank of America, Chase Bank, BNZ, ANZ, you name it. There's rewards, there's bonds, there's insurance. All of it can basically tie to your life. And then with state-endorsed digital identity, which I was talking about with the state of Utah, you can actually have folks that you can manage or pass them to if you were to pass away. It also ties to other things that you would normally do. Maybe it's around agreements or around certificates, marriage certificates, birth certificates. Like in the marriage world, literally we've done over 112,000 cryptographic marriages right out of Utah. You know, the ability to actually have, it's tied to something here. So you've got, this is a derived key. So that zero knowledge proof that you talked about, this is the future of that, where you can actually tie it to an individual. So legally it can actually be linked to the individual, which is better than cryptographic or zero knowledge proofs. So this actually becomes a truly decentralized autonomous chain, if you will. But here's the key. There's a key restoration process, which normal chains don't have. And there's a cation process. So the individual, if their keys are questioned, like let's say they spend their life, decades and decades, building their life inside of licenses or permits or registrations or businesses. Like you can create businesses, and inside of the businesses, you can create assets. And, you know, the world can actually go and see these different environments. Like, for instance, I don't even know what this one is, but this is a public record within the Utah Life environment for this Liberty Commodities Fund. I don't know whose this is. Okay, so I'm just a member of it. There's another manager. But you can see these are private identities of individuals and then assets and businesses and organizations. It really is a parallel system to everything that humanity is currently doing, whether it's voting, whether it's wallets and different currencies, different environments around the world. And when we look at the digital world, we look at basically a rollout in 3 different phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. And, you know, you're talking to somebody that's actually met with all of the BRICS-based countries before COVID, except for one of them. And so this isn't something that is just hypothetical. It's not just a theory. We have been living this for 16 years on decentralized focused systems. And what's happening from my perspective with some of these posts, particularly this post, this is actually the same post that came from this David guy, which I really respect. You know, this is actually what he had to say.
I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if this is just the tip of a giant iceberg.
And that was a couple days ago, and that giant iceberg is turning into some very real realities. And that ties to what we've been talking about within the digital world, and as we've been talking about these, what we're saying, secret combinations. So this isn't just hypothetical. Like, we're talking very mature, very advanced, the most advanced systems in the world. I don't think there's anything even close to the systems that I've been showing you, with different jurisdictions, with different abilities to have permits or registrations, or paralleling up in how you would actually live within an environment, but do so in a decentralized approach in a very private-based environment. So does that answer your question or give you some use points?
Yeah, it definitely does. Definitely does, for sure.
Does it make sense to you?
Oh, yeah. It makes perfect sense. I'm curious, like, is your tech stack, like, have you guys open source this, or for example, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with BitJetlika and Liberland and the effort that's happening over there?
BitJetlika, don't know them. Liberland, I'm very involved in that. I know all the details of it, everything. As a matter of fact, I've traveled on a Liberland passport more than any other human on Earth.
Okay, cool. So I was just going to use them as an example. But if a community such as that, because I'm connected to many of these, if they wanted to utilize this platform, how do they go about doing that?
They would literally just grab a Life app. So they would just come over here, just pick their platform, whether they're on Apple or Android or iOS or Clear or Apple, and they would pick what jurisdiction. So if it's a union, or if it's a country, or if it's a state, however they want to basically link to, and then they would literally just stand up what they want. They don't have to code anything, they don't have to build anything. If they want to see what we've been building, we've got 17 years worth of technology. You can see even just out of this Clear Foundation, what is there, 257 repos just in this one. And you can see they go way back. This is 2018. They go all the way back to 2005 in some of these cases. So very mature, very, very, very real. These are just a couple of the different files. Those are for Clear companies. These are for the digital world. And the Clear companies are just service providers to the digital world. And because it's like what's happening with some of these files. Like this tip of the iceberg is actually coming out and helping people to understand that Jeffrey Epstein was actually involved in the early days, not only of Bitcoin, but also of XRP and then Stellar, and in funding and manipulating how these things actually got going. And when you start understanding and realizing what that is like Bitcoin wasn't this thing where you just check it, throw it out there, post a document and a white paper, and off it goes. There was a lot of things that happened to actually manage it well in from 2009. Actually, the first time it came out in 2008 in Q3 or Q4, and then the first actual what they would call mining was in, I want to say the 3rd of January, maybe the 4th of January, 2009. But it was controlled until 2015. And then you start seeing, I would even say there's elements of control today, but it's not saying that Bitcoin is bad. I actually really believe that Bitcoin is an amazing litmus test for humanity to prove that the cryptography can work and the decentralized model around this can actually work in a very material way. So, but does that answer your question around, how people can plug in and just download the app and get involved?
It does. Do you guys have an API or?
There's not only are there lots of different APIs, but there's the abilities for people just to literally plug in and start actually doing it and getting involved in it. And, there's developers docs so people can actually just start, let's try and find some details for you. So people can just come in and understand, how is it working? What's the technology? What's the integration? What's the linkage? What's the protocols? What's the jurisdictions? How do they work? And so really it's a turnkey environment. So similar to Liberland, but this is more around the technology for the whole world instead of just a little island that's in between Croatia and Serbia, which is basically the Liberland island that they've started to build a couple of houses on or tents on. So does that make sense? It's bigger than just a jurisdiction. It's not like because a jurisdiction can come and go, like what Liberland's doing, or even Palau. Palau is doing some crazy beautiful stuff where the government is like, what? We'll actually give identities, we'll give driver's licenses, we'll give passports, we'll give residency, but the thing is that's also tied to man. The digital world takes a step back from all of that, and it's a framework that isn't tied to one jurisdiction. It's tied to all of us can actually choose to plug into it. So it's not necessarily through code or through API. but you literally just download an app, pick your jurisdiction, and get involved. And if there's something that you want to see changed or modified, for instance, we've had some folks that said, hey, actually, I'll go back over to this documents layer. In this communication, in the applications layer around communications, they're saying we want to actually have real decentralized technology similar to what the world has grown up on as WhatsApp and then Signal, and in the future of Signal, in how it can actually truly be non-profiled and linked into all these systems. So a lot of it is, hey, if you've got developers that want to get involved, let's develop together, let's collaborate together, let's work together. Because APIs are basically ways for people to say, we've got this sand hill and we got this sand hill, and we'll just throw sand back and forth and try and that's not true collaboration. That's through silos. And so we just think about things around standards, around open source, around life, identity, and then building underneath that. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Yeah.
Michael, there was a really interesting conversation there. It was really helpful. I thought, but like if we come down to like building work together, you really need to flip how you think about these things. So the digital world platform and all the layers are very much human first, and then when you come up against the rules of society, for example, this horse, maybe we get back to the horse racing or horse syndication example, where we're looking at syndication of racehorses. And I think the answer, if I can look at how you structure it, anyone can create the asset in terms of a horse and create shares in a horse. The question is, in a regulated industry like that, where do you put the control? So is the control at the after the fact, I guess. So let's say someone creates the asset and they're not qualified, like they've got a criminal history, or they're not they're not of age, they're underage, or whatever the issue is. How do you handle it? Handle digital world, the applications when they rub up against the regulations of a country, I guess is my question.
That's a really good question, because it ties to the core of what I believe is the biggest competitive advantage and barrier to entry for others that are currently in the centralized environments. And the answer is two words: one, endorsement, and two, guardianship. So what, for instance, the state of Utah is doing with state-endorsed digital identity is actually acknowledging that the individual can actually exist, but then for that individual to do certain things within society, such as, let's say they're not of age to be able to bet on a horse race, okay? There's a guardianship role where a parent can actually be a guardian over a child, or the child can actually be a guardian over a senior parent. Then they're rolling these different use cases out. And so someone could actually log into a game or a horse race, and they could, in effect, either spend money or not spend money based upon the governing jurisdiction, New Zealand or Aotearoa, that has endorsed a certain type of individual to say, hey, this is an individual that's of age and has money and can do this or can spend money. And then they can actually get into it. So there's checks and balances. So the individual is recognized as a decentralized individual, but the governing body, like let's say in Aotearoa or New Zealand, there's a governing horse race body that says we need to make sure that the people that are involved in these types of things are actually good. They have good character. They're not felons, and they have the ability to be of age, and they can do it. So check, that endorsement. And then the guardianship enables that type of a system to actually still be owned by the individual. It's private to the individual. The transactions are also there, so the payments, and it literally brings it all together in a way where everyone can comply and conform, but privacy and identity is still obfuscated and kept private. Does that make sense?
It does. What I'm trying to get is that, like, do you still need to, when you're building the application for racing, say, build, and you're using the digital world tools, is this what you mean by co-developing? Because you kind of cross that bridge when you come to it in terms of how the experience, where do you put the control in place? Do you, like, for example, do you let anyone create an asset related to a horse and then let the local body, keep it their own registry and only allow the horses that are, legally registered to participate in the racing industry? So it's more about philosophy, like,
So-
because I get the feeling this is about freedom and allowing everyone to do whatever they want, but it's just where is the control point? Because I can't find the layer. Like you mentioned endorsements, but it doesn't seem to
Well, that endorsement
allow.
is tied directly to the Utah stuff that's currently going through the legislative process. And once that happens, it'll continue to mature and then be an example to others. But think about this, think about the digital world that everyone can plug into, but then they also live in a physical part of the world that's a jurisdiction, okay? And that is where the control mechanism happens. In that jurisdiction that they're physically living in, for instance, we all need to abide by a certain type of law. Like we all physically live in a jurisdiction, and that physical jurisdiction has law of the land. So we're physically living in a jurisdiction that has law of the land, but then we can digitally plug into an ecosystem that is a global digital world where we all are private members of this digital world. And the fine balance, and I think this is the directly answer to your question, the fine balance is how those local jurisdictions can either recognize that the individuals are sovereign and decentralized and independent, like what Utah's doing, or they can do the opposite and say, no, if you don't comply, we're not going to be able to work. You're not going to be able to drive. You're not going to be able to have a bank account. You're not going to be able to have a cell phone number. They can continue to do that. But I believe that in the future, people will gravitate to environments where they're actually free and where jurisdictions and governments recognize their freedom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I was just looking at some of your docs. You talk about legal classification of assets. So there's potentially room to clarify the classification and the regulatory treatment of the assets in the platform. But I'd have to dig deeper in terms of how it works.
If you want, I can, here, I'll jump into, so what I'm going to do is go to the governance. I'm going to mouse over and go to legislation. And then I'm going to jump into some of these documents. So these are different acts that are in the digital world. Some of them are draft, some of them are fully approved. But if we jump into, like, let's say this Jobs Act, this is one of the most complex acts in the world. Created, the godfather of this was a guy named David Wild, wonderful guy. He's been out here numerous times. But basically, the Security and Exchange Commissions in the United States of America is one of their most rigorous systems. And they have things called Reg A, Reg C, Reg S, and Reg D, and different versions of them. And the digital world parallels up all of these different types of definitions and then adopts it as a standard and then has the systems that go with it. Now, that's not to say that, let's say that the United States of America wanted to adopt the same type of digital world framework. They could roll out their own laws, their own structure, but they could use the different layers that we're talking about as they wish. They could say, hey, we'll abide by identity and we'll abide by payments, and that's it. We don't care about storage or assets or any of the other stuff. And to your point, like, anybody can come into this digital world, let's say that's in the side of this jurisdiction here with the Utah Life Pilot. They can come in, they can create a business, they can create within that business, they can create a new asset. So this is a particular type of asset. Maybe it's an account, maybe it's a physical asset, a currency, an equity, a commodity, a crypto, a reward, a bond, an insurance, or other. They can come in and say, hey, I want to actually create this type of asset. Maybe it's a home. And they can actually go and build these things and make them so that they're unique to them. By the way, they would scan this. So they're actually creating these assets. They're self-selecting, creating whatever they so choose, But there also has to be a point where how does it get recognized to be able to be interchangeable so that one could say, I want to take this asset and convert it into this asset, and for it to actually have trading pairs that work and there are real systems behind it. This isn't the speculative crypto world. As a matter of fact, a lot of the crypto stuff can actually layer on top of this. So for instance, this is Bitcoin, right? $68 billion worth of value in trades. You know, you can see kind of the history and the volumes, but this could be under a framework within the digital world where it actually transfers in real time instead of the 10 minutes. And it actually has true privacy instead of the lack of privacy that Bitcoin actually offers. So by using the frameworks and these different layers, if you will, and then the lodge structure, but the countries can roll out their own. They don't have to follow what the digital world is, because an individual can say, you know what, I'm a member of the digital world, but I may live in a certain jurisdiction where I have to do things according to the law of that jurisdiction. But if the jurisdiction, like the state of Utah, recognizes that digital world and says, hey, if you want to order a steak and do it in privacy, you can do it. And you know what? The vendors, the service providers just basically follow suit to enable you to purchase with your own digital identity and payment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think the other piece is that, like with your DEXs, your decentralized exchanges, that's probably a good control point to only allow trading of assets that are illegal, and that's going to be important from a regulatory standpoint in terms of who can buy and sell assets. And you know, think about all the retail investor rules versus wholesale investors and all the rest of it. That's going to be pretty critical when it comes to scaling that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I know yours is a kind of a membership platform, so maybe that's where you create the control at the beginning, so you don't let non-eligible investors in. So there's lots of ways of handling it. Hey man, I'm going to have to jump, but I look forward to catching up tomorrow.
Yeah, same. I really appreciate just what you've done in your life and the parallel paths that we can come together on this. So thank you so much. It looks like
100%.
Victoria.
Thank you, Michael. I'll make it quick. So just basically for the average user, how would they know how their information in the digital ID system is safe? Because I know, but a lot of people what's a bare bones way of explaining when they come into all these different digital IDs, because we're getting bombarded by, digital ID this, digital ID that.
Well,
how do they know that they're actually holding their information? How do they know where that information is being held?
There's a couple different things. One is when they download the app doesn't ask them for any data. Two, in the app, still don't provide the data. The ability for folks and verify is always done with their existing data with centralized systems that are basically think about it this way, and most people don't even understand what they're doing, but if you've used Plaid before, Plaid lets you log into your own systems, and they do so much more. Like they go into your accounts, they see all your history from inception, how much transactions, you name it, everything. And they suck that data out into third-party systems. We don't do any of those things. We literally, and you can see it from the data flow. So it's not a matter of.
You're cutting out a lot, Michael.
Oh, it's not a matter of,
You're cutting out a lot.
That's too bad. Let's see what we got going on here. Yeah, I'm actually about ready to die from a power standpoint. Literally 2% left. It's a matter of the data isn't pulled from them, Victoria. And so they'll see that over time. Like some people say, I can, let's pull this one out, see if I can get more power over there. They can see basically that it's not pulling the data. So it's not a matter of having to trust that it's not in a centralized database. It's just knowing that it wasn't pulled. So I hope that answered your question, Victoria.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You too. Glenn, feel free to mute and then ask your question, bud.
Yeah, oh, 1 second. Hi, guys. Glad to be here. Just wanted your personal take and opinion and on XRP. I've been staking XRP for the last little while. So I appreciate your personal opinion there, Michael, on is that going to be surpassing Bitcoin like all the hype is saying in the last little while?
I respect what the CTO and some of the team members with Ripple have done, and the community around XRP. I think that they've done a lot. They're probably one of the most well organized crypto ecosystems, but it's just that it's a crypto ecosystem. And I personally, I look at a future where real value has to be relayed. When you look at how much XRP is out there in the world, and then how the interchange is actually supposed to work and drive the value, the math doesn't add up. And so for me, and even along with what you're seeing with some of these Epstein files and other things, you can see that there's been controlled manipulation for a very long time. I personally don't, I believe in what's being built here, where it's not a centralized environment within the digital world, where true decentralization based around identity first, not payments. XRP and Ripple is all about payments. And you can't just say by moving money that you're going to be able to make money. That logic doesn't resonate with me as a human. I think that the ability to be free and to own your own identity and your own data and your own assets is where real value is actually realized. And you can monetize that. What if people could actually get paid for the data that's been stolen from them for decades? What if people could actually get paid for companies that market to them, instead of having an interary Google and Facebook that are basically getting paid for giving out their